Lewis Hamilton's Baku mistake could prove to be costly in the context of the 2021 World Championship. The British driver had a great opportunity to regain the lead in the drivers' standings after he lost it in Monaco, but his costly error on the red flag restart dropped him down the order to finish 15th, keeping the championship lead the same as it was going into that weekend. It's not the first significant error that we've seen from Hamilton this season after just 6 races, so is Lewis Hamilton making too many mistakes this season? Let's have a look. My name's Andy and this is Behind the Drive. This video will assess Hamilton's 2 significant mistakes so far this season, and look at the factors that contributed to them at the time. I'll then have a quick look at the similarities in the situations that the Mercedes driver was facing during those particular races. And then finally, I'll take a look at his other races this season, and determine my opinion on whether the British driver is making too many errors in 2021. If you enjoy this video, please leave it a like and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so, and leave a comment on what you think on this topic as well. I'd love to hear what you have to say on the subject. Hamilton's 2021 mistakes. Immola. The first significant mistake in Hamilton's season came at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. After a great qualifying session on Saturday, Hamilton lined up on pole position, ahead of the 2 Red Bull drivers. Heavy rain before the beginning of the Grand Prix had complicated matters in what was really looking like a 2 versus 1 fight for the Mercedes driver, with both Perez and Verstappen in the Red Bulls lining up behind him on the grid, and Valtteri Bottas away down the order in 8th. So the pressure was building before the lights had even gone out, and once they did, Verstappen was rapid off the line and managed to get himself past Hamilton at Tamburello. The mistake for the world champion though came on lap 31. After stopping on lap 28 and lap 27 respectively, Hamilton was hunting down Verstappen with better pace on the slick Pirelli tyres. With a drying track, it was still tough conditions for all the drivers, and soon after that round of pit stops, the lead drivers were lapping the back markers. And this is when Hamilton ended up in the gravel at Tosa, trying to navigate his way past George Russell. This should have been an incident that cost Lewis Hamilton dearly, and after he took his time to get out of the gravel and back to the pits for repairs, he was down in 9th place. Given the challenging nature of the conditions, had the race continued from this point with a field spread out, the Mercedes driver would have been probably lucky to get his car back to 5th place by the end. But a high-speed incident between Bottas and Russell, which also took place on lap 31, actually gave Hamilton a bit of luck. The red flag then gave him a chance to unlap himself, which meant that at the race restart, Hamilton had all 8 cars directly in front of him, and he managed to overtake 7 of them before the finish to ensure that he limited the damage done by his mistake. I've said it already, but Hamilton was really lucky in this instance. A terrifying high-speed crash that nobody wants to see is what caused the red flag. And if you believe that it was done on purpose or that the red flag was raised to give Hamilton a chance to get back up the order, then I think you need to take off your tinfoil hat. It's something that I saw in the comments of my 5 Things We Learned video from that race, and it's a real shame to see that people think that a red flag would be called for anything other than safety grounds. But nonetheless, the mistake from Hamilton to end up in the gravel was really an unforced error that nearly cost him dearly. Even he admitted that it was uncharacteristic, and said that he was in too much of a hurry to get past the back markers. But I would argue that whilst this was a mistake, the way he handled the situation showed the calibre of driver that Hamilton is. Many drivers would panic, and to be fair, initially Hamilton did as he tried to drive forwards out of the gravel, which put him straight into the barrier. But then, the British driver took his time to make sure he got his car into reverse, and then carefully drove out of the gravel, all the while making sure he didn't over-rev the car and beach himself in the trap. It also shows his knowledge of the rules, with some fans criticising him for reversing onto the track, but for Hamilton to be aware that it was legal and carefully ensure that he didn't end up reversing for too long whilst under that much pressure is quite impressive. And this is what kept him in with a chance of making up the positions. So a mistake that was disappointing to say the least, but not the end of the world when looking at it from the perspective of the World Championship. Hamilton's 2021 mistakes. Baku. Then we have Hamilton's second significant mistake of the 2021 season, which came at the recent race in Baku. The Mercedes team were having a tough weekend already, with both drivers struggling in the Friday practice sessions and the team being forced to head back to the drawing board, working late into the evening in an effort to find some pace in advance of the weekend's competitive sessions. I thought that the Mercedes race debrief video by their technology director Mike Elliott was absolutely fascinating. I'd recommend going to watch it just to see how open and honest they were about the situation that the team were facing at the time. I'll leave a link to that video in the description. The team worked hard and Lewis Hamilton managed to find enough pace in the car to put it second on the grid. However, as Elliott mentions in that debrief video, the team had limited time in FP3 to try the alternative setups that unlocked the pace in their car. This meant that they could only fully prepare for qualifying, with their race pace being somewhat unknown going into Sunday. The race in general needed to be one of damage limitation for this very reason. Their car, as we saw in Monaco, is not really well suited for street circuits anyway at the moment, and once their weekend got underway, they were really on the back foot. Hamilton's mistake came late on in the race. After the pit stops, he found himself behind both Verstappen and Perez in third, and he was looking unlikely to be able to make any significant attempt at overtaking them, given they were all on the same strategy and Hamilton didn't have the pace advantage that was needed to make a move around the streets of Baku. However, another high-speed incident caused by a tyre failure down the main straight for Max Verstappen opened the door for Lewis Hamilton to regain the lead of the championship and significantly outscore his rival. After the subsequent red flag period, Hamilton lined up in second position behind Sergio Perez, with just 2 laps on the clock. And he got off to a great start, with a better launch than the Mexican driver as he headed into turn 1. But his mistake came after he accidentally switched on the brake magic function, a setting that pushes the brake balance towards the front and is designed to support the driver in warming up the brakes at slow speeds. This sent him down off into the runoff area and dropping to the back of the order after all the cars hurtled past him. He ended up down in 15th place and let a golden opportunity to bring home a large haul of points slip through his fingers. For me, there are 3 key points to pick out here. Firstly, I think the setup of the steering wheel, which is done as a collaboration between the driver and team, is clearly flawed. For the driver to be able to turn on this setting without realising, and whilst racing into turn 1, poses a huge risk to both the driver himself and to all of the other drivers on the grid. Imagine if this had happened to a driver that was in the midfield pack. It could have caused a huge and terrifying incident. Then you have Hamilton's comment before the restart, where he said, "It's a marathon, not a sprint," over the radio, to which Peter Bonington and Toto Wolff both agreed. So it's interesting to see how his instincts were to be cautious, but this didn't end up being too helpful as he still made an error that we haven't seen him do before, or certainly not recently. Hamilton's cool, calm and collected approach over the last 4 World Championship campaigns have been focused around making little to no mistakes over the season, whilst maximising his own point scoring opportunities when they present themselves. This performance, and this error, is one for me that doesn't display those same qualities that we've grown accustomed to watching Lewis Hamilton over the last 4 seasons in particular. Then the final point to make on this error is the British driver's response to it. After heading back to Parc Fermé, he took some time for himself, and then came back to apologise to the team for the situation. For me, this shows what we already know. Hamilton is very aware that you need a strong team around you in order to win the World Championship. The team was down after a difficult weekend where the team ended up scoring 0 points, and so he wants to make sure that he's there to build them back up again in time for the next race. And this feeling was evident in that debrief video that I mentioned earlier. I've talked about the 2 significant mistakes that we've seen Hamilton make in 2021, in Italy and Azerbaijan. But what are the similarities between the 2? Well, the key point to make here is that they both came at races where Hamilton's teammate, Valtteri Bottas, was way off the pace and running much further down in the order, offering no support from a strategic point of view near the front of the order. Now, I've already discussed this point regarding the Immola error, but it was the same case in Baku, with Bottas starting the race in 10th and ending up 12th after a dreadful performance. Now, it is only 2 events, so it could be a coincidence that the mistakes happened at races where Hamilton was on his own at the front. But even if it's a subconscious thing, it says a lot about the championship battle and the fact that both Bottas and Perez have significant influence over how it could play out this year. And on that flip side as well, Perez has done well at points during both of these race weekends. At Immola, he'd had a poor start to the race, but certainly on the Saturday, he'd done well to put his Red Bull on the front row. Yes, he fell back on the Sunday and made some errors himself, but from Hamilton's perspective at the start of the Grand Prix, he was looking at 2 Red Bull drivers lining up directly behind him, all the while knowing that his teammate was much further down the order. And then of course in Baku, it was Sergio Perez who was there to pick up the pieces and ended up going on to win the race. So again, with Perez outperforming Bottas, Hamilton could feel like Mercedes then end up on the back foot from a strategic point of view, and this was evident in Baku in particular, where the Mercedes driver went into the pits early, fearing the Red Bull drivers would undercut him, and in the end, he got overcut by both Verstappen and Perez. The other races in 2021. So perhaps Hamilton is feeling the pressure when his teammate struggles during a race weekend, but there was also Monaco, where again the Mercedes car wasn't suited to the street circuit layout, and the team again as a whole was struggling. On this occasion though, it was Hamilton who was off the pace with his teammate out at the front. It's difficult to identify a single mistake for Hamilton on this occasion, as he was never comfortable with the car all weekend, and simply didn't show the pace that Bottas was able to achieve. But at all of the other 3 races so far this season, in Portugal, Spain and Bahrain, Hamilton's been at the very top of his game, with some dominant performances in the races. He's also performed very well in the wheel-to-wheel battles that he's had with his championship rival, Max Verstappen. So it's not like Hamilton's entirely off the boil this year, but more that his performances are a bit more peaky than usual, with the 2 major errors in particular highlighting this. I think it's important to note that without the luck that he received at Immola and the red flag, we'd also have a very different view on how this season was going so far, and he's likely to have ended up much further down the order in that race. So really, it's 3 good races and 3 pretty poor races so far this season for Hamilton. Given the next few races are heading back towards the nature of circuit that Hamilton's performed well at already this season, I think it's safe to expect that the British driver and the Mercedes team will get back towards the front in the next race in France, and for many more of the remaining events this season. And based on Hamilton's track record in previous years, it would be silly to write him off at this stage of the year. It's also true that since losing the World Championship to Nico Rosberg in 2016, Lewis Hamilton has been operating at a superior level when compared to the rest of the grid. His consistency has been one of his strongest assets, along with some sublime performances in the latter stages of each season. He's often come back from the summer break and truly excelled. For example, he won 5 of the last 9 races in 2017, 6 of the last 9 in 2018, 3 of the last 9 in 2019, and then 6 of the last 9 races that he competed in during the shortened 2020 season. Now of course that doesn't guarantee he'll do the same this year, especially given this season is slightly different with new regulations on the horizon and a budget cap restricting the amount of development that the teams can complete this season. But it's not a bad record to have, that's for sure. For me, Hamilton's had a rocky start to the season, and he's fortunate to still be just 4 points behind Max Verstappen when looking at the 6 races as a whole. But there is no doubt that if there's anyone on the grid that has enough experience to turn it around and up his game, it's Lewis Hamilton. Make sure to let me know your thoughts on Hamilton's chances in the comments, and whether he's made too many mistakes so far this season. And thanks for watching. If you have watched this far, then make sure to leave a like, and hit the subscribe button for more F1 opinion videos like this one in the future.